Welcome to the Dense Biozone. This planetary region contains quite a mouthful of biome features. They can range from being green flower-looking studs that hang into the walls, and of course to having very hostile plant life. The Dense Biozone's caves can be a little funky to traverse. They feature deep and yet weirdly bowl-shaped caves that can make it hard to traverse if you are not a high mobility class. And of course, it even is worth noting that the falls can be very fatal. The Dense Biozone is rated at 2 for rock hardness, meaning that it requires 2 pickaxe hits for you to destroy the environment around you. The materials you can expect to find in the Dense Biozone are bismore, which has an abundant supply, and umanite, which has a scarce supply. As far as enemy encounters go in the Dense Biozone, you can expect the standard array of enemies as far as Glyphids or Mectera, including of course cave leeches or spitballers to ruin your day. There also happens to be very unique enemies, much like you've seen before in the glacial strata, which are known as the Nadosite Shockers. There also happens to be a docile creature that is unique to this biome. These are known as the Nadosite Cave Cruisers. They seem to mostly just float around, sucking up static charges from the surroundings, and being mostly oblivious to the happenings around it. I do like using the deep voice, but let's move on from using the deep voice, and let's get more serious about the Dense Biozone. As mentioned before, this planetary region contains a mouthful of features. There are so many features that I don't really know where to start, but we'll start with the most obvious one getting out of the way, which is of course the Nadosite Shockers. Much like the glacial strata, you'll be able to encounter the Nadosite Shockers in the Dense Biozone. They can spawn whenever a wave of enemies appears, when it comes to a normal wave, when mission controls alerts you of a wave incoming, or they can spawn whenever a natural wave appears. They attack in groups, and they can sneak up on you when you're not ready for them. When damaged by Nadosite Shockers, they will slow your movement temporarily and also flash you with some lightning in your face. It can be quite annoying to deal with them when they're right in front of your face, flashing your screen from time to time, but it is of course worth noting that area of effect weapons are very effective against them. Most notably for the driller's weapons, of course, being the flamethrower and the cryo cannon. The Nadosite Cruiser is also an exclusive to this biome. It's of course a part of the Nadosite family, but it is completely docile. Much like we've seen in the Azure Weald or even the Radioactive Exclusion Zone, there's something about seeing docile creatures in the caves of Hoxie's that kind of just add a little bit more to the atmosphere of this planet. And of course, much like any other docile creature, if you point your laser pointer at them, it'll glow red. Kind of toxic, IMO. And now, let's move on to the hazards that you'll be able to come across in this biome. I'm pretty sure you recognize these bulky, bubbly plants. Except for the fact that in this biome, they're a slightly different color. Exploding plants in the Dense Biozone have a blue hue to them instead of being red as you normally see in the magma core and the fungus bogs. And of course, much like we've seen the exploding plants in the fungus bogs and the magma core, they do have a tendency to explode whenever you damage them. Okay, I kind of want to see that one more time. As Tank Dempsey would say, "There's just something so beautiful about blowing shit up." Exploding plants come in 3 different sizes that range from different health pools and of course different damage, with the smallest plant dealing the least amount of damage and the biggest plant doing the largest amount of damage. Up next within the Dense Biozone, you'll be able to come across very strange looking cacti. These plants can be easily mistaken for a cactus as you can normally see in a desert, but unfortunately for these cacti, they do have a tendency to eject their very sharp spikes and damage anything around them. These are known as ejector cacti. These are plants that launch spike projectiles in many directions at once. They are capable of damaging players, enemies, and detonating explosive plants. It is a very common case of finding loot bug guts within this planetary region, and they can also detonate explosive plants, and you'll be able to hear explosions when you're not even ready for it. Whoever said that plant life needs access to sunlight has obviously never visited Hoxie's, for we have another plant that is quite hostile when it comes to players, which is known as the Trapticus. I think I said it right. An eggplant-shaped plant with many small holes around it. When attacked or approached by a player, spikes will shoot out of each hole and retract, damaging and knocking back any players within the area. It seems that the Trapaticus does not damage any enemies in the area, or even when it comes to docile creatures. The amount of damage that these plants are able to do is pretty gruesome, so do be careful where you tread your step. Moving on to another plant, but although I don't really consider these plants, you may have seen sea urchins, but these are known as cave urchins. These are small, spiky cactus-like plants which damage any dwarves that come into contact with it. I also have seen an instance where a cave urchin has also damaged a fester flea, but I will need to test it a lot more. The amount of damage that the cave urchins will do is very little, but when it comes to shield disruption, they can get very annoying very quickly, so this is why it's always a good idea, once again, much like the Trapaticus, to watch your step. Similarly to how we've seen in the fungus bogs, Glyphid Eggs are also within this planetary region. Within these eggs contain Glyphid swarmers. They will burst out when an egg is damaged. There's also random chances of all nearby eggs will even burst, and if you're not careful enough, a bunch of Glyphid swarmers could start to attack you, much like Swarmageddon is active. Shh, the babies are sleeping. Also similarly to how we've seen in the radioactive exclusion zone, we have spiderwebs. These are thin webs that spawn naturally when the cave seeds are generated, and they are pretty thin, so at a certain angle, they can be kind of impossible to see with how paper thin they are, which is of course the resemblance of a two-dimensional image that doesn't follow you wherever your character is moving. These thin webs will slow anything that passes through them, and will also impair the vision of other players. They can be burnt down with a flamethrower or other sources of fire damage. One trick that I like to do when playing solo is that I have Bosco run through the spiderwebs. He doesn't get slowed, but it does make the sound effect confirming that the spiderweb has triggered, and it does disappear very shortly after. And now may I present to you one of my favorite biome features, which is right next to the glowing tree that you can find in fungus bogs. These are known as elevator plants. Large plants that are capable of moving dwarves up or down whenever stepped on, or even when the glowing bulb on the plant is damaged. They can spawn anywhere in the caves. 100% of the time they won't be in convenient spots where they can lift you up to get into a tight squeeze area, but sometimes you'll be able to find that they'll be able to lift you to the place where you need to go, which can be very useful for traversing the very tricky cave system that is, of course, on Dense Biozone. Elevator plants have a lot of health, and it is worth noting that in the current version of the game, as of today, that when you kill them, they make quite the terrifying roaring sound, and this is also the same roaring sound that happens whenever you kill the Dreadnought twins. And it's very creepy knowing that these plants have a roaring sound. But overall though, these plants are honestly one of my favorite biome features ever. When they're conveniently placed to help you traverse the tricky caves of the Dense Biozone, it honestly is super helpful to have these around, and even providing yourself with a high ground if you're getting yourself in a tight spot when it comes to, well, of course, having a swarm on you. And now here we go with something a little creepy. You may have seen cave eyeballs when it comes to the radioactive exclusion zone, but in the Dense Biozone, we have tongues. These creepy things are known as coral tongues, and when you ping them in multiplayer, they have the same type of voice lines when you ping an aerocube or any other strange object that you encounter on Hoxies. These are small cyan-colored tentacles which aimlessly wiggle around, and they can give you a little bit of a gross feeling whenever you look at them. Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's talk about what makes the Dense Biozone the Dense Biozone. The Dense Biozone features a lot of coral-like substances which are actually known as cave corals. There are 5 different types of cave corals that you can expect to see in the Dense Biozone. They come in very unique shapes, sizes, lengths, and they can connect to different parts of the cave once the cave seeds are, of course, generated. This can kind of give you the feeling that you're also in an underwater coral ocean, and honestly, I can kind of vibe with that. It's pretty nice. Also, for some reason in the Dense Biozone, it likes to rain. But truth be told, rain does provide some twists when it comes to this game, or even in the Dense Biozone. While it's raining, all dwarves have a 100% increased resistance towards fire damage, meaning that if you stand on top of hot rock when it comes to meteorites from lithophage meteors, you won't take any fire damage whatsoever. But most notably, of course, when it rains, it decreases your vision and also decreases the effectiveness of flares from flare guns or even normal flares. One of the most common things that you'll be able to come across in the Dense Biozone are these weird green studs that kind of look like flowers that hang out in the walls. These are known as glowing floras. One most notable thing about these is that they are able to assist with cave navigation in the dark whenever you're out of flares as a scout or when you just need to find somewhere to go. With the Dense Biozone featuring very big and rich caves, It's probably one of my favorite caves to navigate, but not so much of my favorite of being able to find secondary objectives or even when it comes to trying to find my way when I'm a low mobility class. But although this planetary region kind of makes me feel the most calmest when I play this game, even though of course we're up against 2-ton spider armies. And with all that knowledge, you are now ready to face the Dense Biozone. Nice voice crack, me. Have a good rest of your... Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to give a thumbs up if you did, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace and take care, and rockin' stone.